Deep in the heart of a world we can no longer recognize, a shadow fell across the earth that lasted for centuries. It was a time of giants, but not the kind that breathe or speak. These were the titans of the Carboniferous, trees so immense and so densely packed that they didn't just grow on the land, they rewrote the laws of the sky. Imagine standing at the base of a trunk that feels less like a plant and more like a mountain. You look up, but there is no blue. There is only a suffocating emerald ceiling 300 feet above your head. It is silent, humid, and heavy. This is the story of a lost era where the connection between the heavens and the earth was severed by a wall of wood and leaf. In our modern world, a summer storm breaks, and within seconds the pavement is slick. But in this ancient wilderness, the atmosphere worked on a different clock. When the clouds finally bruised to a deep purple and the sky opened up, the rain didn't fall, it fought. It hit the uppermost canopy with the force of 1,000 hammers, shattering into a fine mist that hung in the stagnant air. For the creatures living in the gloom of the forest floor, the storm was a distant rumor. They could hear the roar of the water miles above their heads, a rhythmic drumming that vibrated through the soil. But they remained bone dry. It would take days, sometimes even a week, for that water to navigate the labyrinth of moss, bark, and fern. The rain had to saturate every leaf, fill every high-altitude hollow, and overflow every branch before a single drop could finally break through to the world below. By the time the first trickle reached the roots, the storm that birthed it had been over for days. Underneath this canopy, the world existed in a state of perpetual twilight. Because the water was held captive by the foliage, the humidity reached levels that would be lethal to most modern life. The air wasn't just gas, it was a thick, wet blanket. This moisture didn't just sit, it transformed. In the absence of direct sunlight, the forest floor became a laboratory of decay and alien growth. Mosses grew feet thick, acting as massive sponges that further delayed the water's journey to the soil. If a storm dropped several inches of rain on the canopy on a Monday, the creatures in the mud might not feel the first cool drip until the following Sunday. This lag created a water cycle that defied everything we understand about weather. The ground was a perpetual swamp, not because it rained constantly, but because the forest refused to let the water leave. The air was hyperoxygenated, fueled by these massive lungs of green, making every breath a fuel for giant insects and nightmares. Dragonflies the size of hawks, with wingspans of nearly 30 inches cut through the heavy air, their wings buzzing in a world where the sun was a myth and the rain was a slow-motion ghost. Scorpions the size of dogs scurried through the leaf litter, perfectly adapted to a world that was always damp but rarely rained on directly. The sheer scale of these trees, Lepidodendron and Sigillaria, is hard for the modern mind to grasp. They didn't have the deep, sprawling root systems of a modern oak. Instead, they stood on shallow, stilt-like structures in a world of soft mud. They relied on each other, packed so tightly that no single tree could fall without being caught by its neighbor. This density created a biological fortress. When a storm raged above, the wind would howl against the top layer, tossing the giant ferns like a turbulent sea. But 100 feet down, the air remained eerily still. A candle could have burned there without a flicker, even as a hurricane ravaged the ceiling. This vertical isolation meant that the water cycle was essentially split into two different worlds. The upper world was one of violent energy, rapid evaporation, and searing light. The lower world was a slow-motion realm of shadows and seeping moisture. The trees acted as a biological dam, regulating the flow of life's most precious resource. Because the water took so long to descend, the forest floor never experienced a drought, nor did it ever experience a flash flood. The canopy acted as a giant living shock absorber, smoothing out the chaos of the atmosphere into a steady, unchanging drip. But this stability came at a price. The massive amount of carbon these trees pulled from the sky began to change the very chemistry of the planet. As they died, they didn't rot like trees do today. The fungi and bacteria that break down wood hadn't evolved yet. Instead, these giants fell into the swamps, sinking into the anaerobic mud, stacking one on top of the other thousands of feet deep. They were burying the Earth's carbon, locking it away in the dark, and in doing so, they were cooling the planet from the inside out. In this claustrophobic paradise, the trees were the masters of time. They didn't just drink the rain, they held it hostage. They created their own internal weather systems, trapped between the canopy and the mud, recycling the same damp breath over and over again. It was a delicate, terrifying balance. But as the continents shifted and the climate began to harden, this emerald fortress started to crumble. The giants couldn't keep up with a world that was growing cold and dry. When the canopy finally broke, the sky returned with a vengeance. The slow, rhythmic drip, drip, drip of the ancient world was replaced by the sudden, violent storms of the modern age. The transition was a catastrophe for the giants. Without the collective shield of the canopy, the individual trees were vulnerable to the wind. The swamps began to dry. The water that took days to reach the ground now hit the earth in seconds, washing away the soil that had been protected for millions of years. The water cycle we know today was born in the ruins of the greatest forest the world has ever seen. We walk over their remains every day, seeing only the coal and the stone they left behind, never realizing that we are standing on the ghosts of a world where the sky was a week away. We burn their bodies to power our cities, releasing the ancient carbon they fought so hard to sequester, unaware of the terrifying engineering they performed on our atmosphere. They were the architects of a world of water and shadow, a world that proved life doesn't just adapt to the environment, it can seize it, hold it, and refuse to let it go. The giants are gone, but the earth still remembers the era when the rain had to ask permission to touch the ground.